The D-Series pump, show you how to change the diaphragm and oil seal. First you would drain the oil, 11/16 inch will pull the drain plug. The head bolts are usually either 1/2 inch or a 13 metric, either one will work. On this particular pump there's going to be a nut, a lock washer, and a spacer on the back side. You do have to have each of those in place as you go back together to get the head to tighten down. This pump is very similar to the G series. You have the diaphragm behind the head and a spacer plate. Usually a 1/4 turn is about enough to be able to unthread by hand. There's your diaphragm assembly. Behind that we have a spring, the spacer plate, and an aluminum ring to hold the spring centered. With this particular pump, to change the oil seal, it does not have a snap ring on the inside or an aluminum ring on the outside. So the spacer shaft is what holds the inside of your oil seal in place. The pair of channel locks on that, you can unthread it. And a 5mm Allen wrench. We'll take out the 4 screws holding the outer housing. These 4 screws hold this housing in place. That is the outside oil seal. Now to change that, just pull the oil seal out and replace with a new one. This looks similar to the one on the G series pump, but it is a different size. You do have to have the correct one in place. Going back together, just make sure that the inside lip slips over the shaft on the connecting rod. A Teflon spacer. The outside edge is already lined up. As you stick the housing on, everything fits right in place. with your spacer. Both ends are threaded, but they are also different size threads. One of them fits onto the bolt on the back of your diaphragm assembly, the other on a bolt in your connecting rod. This spacer that holds the spring centered fits right inside of a groove. Your spring will set over that. The diaphragm spacer has a beveled edge. The bevel goes towards your diaphragm, and then thread in your diaphragm assembly. With this style of pump, you want to ensure that the diaphragm is sucked in tight against the spacer. This one is okay, but I will show you what would happen if we happen to be out. To make sure the diaphragm is pulled in, pull the fan cover off, and you can spin the fan by hand. You'll see the head of that diaphragm sucking in. When it's all the way in, this is where you want to bolt the head on. Where this pump has a spring in there, if I let go of the fan, it may push back out. So you may need to wedge a screwdriver under the fan when it's sucked in. In this case, I will use my 1/2-inch wrench, and just sliding under one of the blades of the fan will hold it in place. We don't have any play back and forward on this spacer, then we're able to bolt the head in place. With our spacer, lock washer and nut. You will need to start all of these before you can tighten any of them down. Once we have all of the bolts in place, we want to snug all of them down slightly before tightening any of them. Once we have all of the bolts snugged, then we can tighten down the head bolts. The check valves on this pump are the same as the G series. You have a union nut. This one is tight enough. I need to hold a little tension to break it loose. The union nut seals the union end with an O-ring fitting. The threads do not actually seal, so they should only need to be hand tight. The check valves have a direction arrow. The arrow points the flow of the liquid. So both suction and discharge cartridge would have the ball on the bottom when they're threaded into the pump. The tools needed for this repair would be 2 1/2-inch wrenches or 13 millimeter for the head bolts. 11/16 wrench will take out your oil drain plug. A 5 millimeter Allen wrench if you have to replace the oil seal. A large crescent if you need to replace the diaphragm assembly. You may need a pair of channel locks if the union nut or check valve are over tightened.